the great thing about episode 5 is that it continues this trend that we're getting basically the best of a spiritual continuum to Top Gear. And that's great, right? After 3 successful episodes, since episode 3, it's been solid and great. And I've really enjoyed it after what was the issue of episode 2. I think we can finally get away from that after we've gotten these great episodes, and there's been a lot of different pieces to these episodes that have made them special and great, particularly this episode as well. You talk about, of course, now they go to the Netherlands, particularly Rotterdam, and, the first thing that we get to is a comparison test, and they start the comparison test, and they're in North Africa. Now, this is always weird to me, but they go back to Rotterdam for a board game card challenge, which we'll talk about in a bit. So they did spend time in that particular area of the Netherlands, but I'm always confused as to why they go here and there and not just do car events in the place that they're in. I think that's the one thing that a lot of people have found to be very odd and questionable, but that's the Grand Tour way. Now, we see, when we start, of course, the Mazda MX-5, introduced by Hammond, and then the Xenos, introduced by James May. And the way in which those two get to, interact, it just felt like Top Gear. I don't know, maybe it's the fact that Clarkson, or Jeremy, maybe it's just the fact that maybe he's the main guy, so he has to feel as great as he did in the original Top Gear. But when May and Hammond are going back to back, it just feels like old Top Gear. And just generally speaking, we get the road trip style review that we've gotten used to from episode 3. We see the contrast between the two cars through the opposing opinions of our two hosts, James May and Hammond. And then Carl Clarkson appears with an Alfa Romeo 4C Spider, and it's, of course, instantly targeted and attacked, and it's overpriced compared to what was supposed to be a budget review of these two vehicles. Now, they do break this thing into 2 pieces, so halfway in we get a break, and then it goes into Conversation Street. Conversation Street, actually, for the first time, felt like a real opinion piece. I felt like they were actually opening up to discussion, and not just a very scripted thing. When they talk about worst police cars, it felt like a very unscripted thing where it's like, oh, well, let's throw out this. Let's talk about American cars, but they're cool, and then let's talk about our own cars in Britain. They suck. And, that was cool. That was what we want from them, a cool, natural discussion. And the outer discussion ended up being more interesting than boring, but the assisted suicide part, I thought it was why are we even bringing this up? It kind of made a dark shadow, but instantly instantly changed because of the fact that we got the board game challenge. The board game challenge, of course, is basically an expanded version of Battleship, played against by James May and Richard Hammond. It was very fun. It was very cool. It was an epic idea, and I enjoyed it. I don't know, some people may not. It reminded me a lot of Destroy, Build, Destroy, so if you're not a fan of, just stupid explosions, you probably won't like it, but I found it enjoyable. I found it cool, and I generally found that part of it enjoyable. I think they try to be strategic and suspenseful with it in the editing. The more it goes on, they try to be more strategic, intense, and suspenseful with the editing, and it works, but it works only when the further it goes into the actual thing. It didn't work in the beginning, but it did when we started to get to the last few pieces of that challenge. But yeah, a very good idea, and I think that went off pretty well. I enjoyed it. Now, I don't know. I think Celebrity Brain Crash, I think they should scrap it completely. It's funny, but I don't know. People laugh at it, so keep it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's kind of broken to me, and I would love for them to actually do some interviews. I get why it's hard to do a star in a reasonably priced car now, but I'd just love to maybe do an interview every once in a while. But obviously that's not going to happen. But what they did instead, where they did the motoring accessory piece, was actually a cool extension of something like the Conversation Street, which was cool. So now we return to the comparison test, and the weight. Then they go into weights. They talk about the number of. Of course, we return to the comparison test, and it's very odd. They're talking about weights, weighting the cars. They get animals. It gets dark because the animals are basically killed off, or they basically get the meat of the animals that were there. Obviously, they weren't killed, but and then on top of that, they damaged the MX-5, which is like, damn, okay. Well, the weight breaks damages the MX-5. But that ends, and then we get Alfa Romeo porn, like car porn. And I don't know, like some people, I guess, is like, that's cool. But for me, if they're not going to talk about the car, don't have it just sit there and be car porn. It's kind of useless. It was sort of like filling a couple minutes when we could have gotten other information about the Miata and the Xenos. And gladly, though, it switches to a end-all circuit race. I really enjoyed that. That really was what we needed to end off on, something between the three. And yeah, I mean, maybe I wish that they went a little further in depth with the Mazda MX-5. I think that car deserved a full review like we got with the BMW and the Porsche last episode. But I still am okay with what they did here, because obviously they're not going to do every single car the same way that they did with the Porsche. And so I think it's an impressive episode. It had a lot of things that episode 2 didn't, and it definitely didn't feel scripted as scripted as episode 2 was. It felt very natural, which is something that, again, I've talked about over and over in previous episode reviews. This feels like a truly spiritual successor to Top Gear. Now, if you watch episode 3 through 5 in a row, just continually, that's it. That feels like Top Gear. It feels like it's okay. All right, the cinematography is great. You don't need to describe the cinematography. You know that it's going to be top notch now. You know that the dialogue is going to be as scripted but unscripted as it can be. Like, this is what they are now. And so I'm okay with this. I'm locked in. I love it. I find that I will continue to subscribe to Amazon for this. I love the three. I love the team. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought that it episode 5 is a great episode. And, also, no American. Guys, no American this time. So that's a good thing. I guess maybe he's going to be every few episodes, and when they do full car reviews like they did with the Porsche, they will do the American. But hopefully at a certain point we just completely shift him off, or we just don't have him again. But guys, what did you think of episode 5? Comment below. Thanks for watching. I'm Brian Swan, and as always, stay tuned for more.